This message comes from NPR sponsor Neutral, offering organic, pasture-raised milk that is carbon neutral certified. Every carton of Neutral milk supports carbon reduction projects on family farms across the country. Find Neutral at Whole Foods, Sprouts, and other natural retailers.
Hey, I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show where we talk about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. And a heads up to listeners, this segment contains mentions of sex. It's no surprise to anyone that it's been a really bad year for television. The strikes really did a number on us, and for those who love TV like me, it's been so bad that I started watching anime, and I don't even like cartoons. But lo and behold, this fall, I finally got something new and juicy to watch. And I want you to know about it. It's called Fellow Travelers. It's a mini-series on Showtime that's giving the people what they want. This historical romance spans from the height of McCarthyism in the 50s to the more is more era of the 1980s. But the story centers on the tumultuous relationship between two men in Washington, D.C. Hawk, a career government man played by Matt Bomer.
I'm no red. I'm a war hero. They include that in the register.
And Tim, an aspiring McCarthyite played by Jonathan Bailey.
I interned for 3 months at the Star. In the mailroom. I have a degree in political science and history. I think I should aim a little higher, don't you?
Tim wants to break into DC politics, and Hawk takes him under his wing, in more ways than one. Both Hawk and Tim are in the closet during the time of the Lavender Scare, a moral panic raised by Senator Joseph McCarthy, who sought to expel gays and lesbians from government service. And that puts their budding romance and their livelihoods at risk.
One of them really loves having sex with men, but can't sort of conceive of falling in love with a man.
This is Inkoo Kang, TV critic for The New Yorker and someone whose TV opinions I trust wholeheartedly. She wrote a glowing review of Fellow Travelers.
And the other one just wants to be loved by anything and everything and wants to be subsumed. I mean, you're just like, my guy, this is like not the guy for you. And yet they're so hot together, so you really have to root for them to be together.
After a long stretch of shows and movies obsessed with multiverses and infinite possibilities, comes this show about America's very real and not so distant past. A show that asks us to examine the human cost of our politics, then and now. Inkoo, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure, my privilege. It's been a pretty bleak year for television.
Yes.
It's also been kind of paltry because of the strikes, so there wasn't really anything getting made. But one of the oases of our 2023 TV desert, for which you wrote a glowing review for The New Yorker, is Fellow Travelers on Showtime. Fellow Travelers is one of the most absorbing dramas of the year. I feel like you want a historical drama to be a world or a series of worlds that you can lose yourself in. And I think this show really has that. But like, what are the qualities that make a historical drama immersive for the viewer?
Part of that immersiveness for me really comes from the fact that you can tell how these characters have been shaped by history because they're almost sort of like chiseled by the historical circumstances around them. I think one of the really great things that the show does, very indirectly, but also very consistently, is trace in the background gay progress from the 50s to the 80s. And I think there's a point maybe in the 70s where they sort of talk about the term gay, right? Because it is a term where people are like, oh, is this like what we're supposed to call ourselves now? Like we're not supposed to say homosexual anymore. And of course, the 20th century has been full of these sort of relabelings of certain minority groups. And you can sort of see how these larger historical forces play out in terms of like these characters' particular quirks, their idiosyncrasies, their like very individual wants and needs. And like that feels so real to me, you know? I mean, maybe this is going like a little bit too far afield, but if I sort of think of myself like back in the 1800s or something, I always think like who is the person that I would be? Because there is no way that I could
Yeah.
be myself, a woman born in America
Right.
in the 1980s, right? And so it's just fascinating to see these like very relatable personalities so completely informed by their time period.
That's a really good point. Something that you don't always think about yourself in that way. Like, I don't always think about myself as specifically a product of my time and era. But it's like I see it so clearly with the characters on this show in the way that you described.
And I think Tim is such a perfect example because Tim, who is played by Jonathan Bailey, he's the guy that, you know, he's the McCarthyite. He is so invested in being subsumed by some larger organization or some larger campaign.
He wants to join something. He wants to be a part of something.
I don't think he even wants to belong. I think he utterly wants to be taken over by something else. And so, you know, initially when he's growing up on Staten Island, it's Catholicism. And then it's McCarthyism. And then left-wing activism during the Vietnam War. Is it a campaign to get AIDS more recognized by the government? He's just sort of flailing around. And when you find that he actually finally at last finds a calling that is sort of worthy of his passion, it's so beautiful and so satisfying.
That's such a beautiful point. I mean, that character of Tim is like, he's my favorite character on the show. You single out Jonathan Bailey's performance as Tim in your review for The New Yorker. Like, what makes his journey specifically so compelling for you that it stands out in such a way on the show?
I think what Jonathan Bailey does so beautifully is every time you think that you have figured Tim out, you know, he goes to these bars and he orders milk and you're just like, my God, like, get a life. Every time you think that you have figured him out, you're like, oh no. I think it's truly like in the first episode where Hawk and Tim initially meet each other at a election night party for Eisenhower, and they're sort of like talking at the bar. And then the next day they sort of just happen to see each other and they talk, and Hawk basically figures out this man is gay and interested in me. And Tim says something like, I'm gonna go to mass now.
Oh, I should leave soon anyway.
Job interview?
It's noon mass at St. Joseph's.
And Hawk says, I'll spend the rest of the afternoon picturing you kneeling in prayer.
I'll spend the afternoon picturing you kneeling in prayer.
And there is just like a smile, like a really, really small smile that Tim allows himself, where you can tell that this is the moment at which he has been recognized and he is desired. And there is just like this very brief moment of like absolute happiness that infuses his whole body. And you're just like, oh, we are in the presence of an actor.
That is such a good moment to highlight. I mean, I think that there's something in the timeline focus that makes this specific show so good. Like, it covers some really interesting history, but they also really consider how that time ages the characters.
Yeah. I think what I really love is that by the time you get the full picture of their relationship over those 30 years, as they go in and out of each other's lives, it feels really real, you know? I, like, that was like the aspect of the show I was like the most scared of, to be honest, because I was like, are these actors who I believe are, you know, in their 30s and 40s, and honestly, sometimes like not in the best old age makeup, are they going to really feel to me like people in their 50s and 60s with all of that heaviness and regret? And for me, it really pulled it off. And Brittany, you are nodding.
I'm nodding, yeah, because I'm like, I feel like Hawk in the earlier scenes, I'm like, I see he's got some things that he's wrestling with, but he's kind of like Don Drapering through life to a certain degree. But yeah, no, that regret is hitting hard in the 80s, and you can see it. So for listeners who don't know, and this isn't a big spoiler, as time passes, Hawk chooses to pass as straight and basically live on the down low, marry a woman, and continue to work in the government.
Has children,
exactly. But the show almost seems to posit that, like, for all of the obvious benefits and power that presents, when his life is contrasted with the life we see that Tim has, even though Tim is dying of AIDS basically at that point. He has a full life. It looks like he has the kind of full life to a certain degree that maybe Hawk never thought was possible for himself.
And he has a sense of purpose
Yeah.
that Hawk doesn't.
Tim can be his full self in a way that Hawk absolutely cannot.
Yeah, and I think part of like what you are able to sort of contrast as gay progress happens in this country and as people are able to be more, truthful versions of themselves and maybe, I don't know, lie to everyone around them less. You can sort of see that Tim, as he is becoming more and more out, is able to put all of moralizing compulsions, I guess, really, in a positive direction. And you see that Hawk is sort of like unable to move along with history. He's sort of stuck in some ways in the past that has scarred him and made him to be a sort of survivor in some of the ugliest ways. Yeah, so a lot of like what we get with the show is you see these sort of analogs of Hawk with much greater power, which are basically Roy Cohn and Joseph McCarthy, who are posited here as closeted men who are going after other gay men so that they can deflect suspicion from themselves, right? And you also see probably in like Hawk's lowest moment doing something quite similar. And you sort of wonder, as homosexuality is more accepted, is he going to find it within himself to be a more tender person, a better person, a person who actually deserves the things that he has? And I think that's truly like one of the greatest tensions or like the greatest moments of suspense for the show, is Hawk going to be able to adapt to the 70s or the 80s? And if he isn't, then how much can he essentially continues really killing a certain part of himself?
There's a real like diversity on this show of ways that the gay men sit with their queerness. They're always making some sort of negotiation or doing some type of calculation. The show is doing something really interesting and kind of is departing from what I see as somewhat of a norm these days, where like many mainstream LGBTQ narratives aim to show gay communities together, exuberant, warring against oppressive forces. Whereas this show gives us a different experience of all of these different gay men, and they're trying to kind of like hide and play into mainstream norms because they could lose their jobs if they're outed. There's a lot of like intra-community conversation that's happening on the show that feels a little bit more rich than just a group of people who are magically getting along because they all share one identity aspect.
We were talking earlier about, what makes this historical drama different from other historical dramas. Like, why is this like the special girl, right? And what is so fascinating about this particular beginning time period is that there is no set definition of what is gayness, what is queerness, what is homosexuality, what is a homosexual life. And so all of these people are just sort of feeling their way through the dark and trying to figure out how they can make it work for themselves. So we meet, for example, one character at a party for a bunch of queer Washingtonians, and one of them says, well, like, I'm a religious guy, but I also am celibate.
I have God.
Oh, I thought you...
I am.
Then how do you manage...
I'm celibate. You have to decide what matters most to you.
And that is like the way that he can sort of square his own needs with his own identity. And so this is like maybe one of the aspects of the show that I love the most, because it felt so true to life, because there hadn't been this codification yet of what queerness is. And the only thing that they really know is that they have particular desires, and they don't know really what to do with those desires, but they know that they can be persecuted for having them. And it's just like a question that is like both so philosophical, like what does queerness mean, especially when you don't have defining texts or defining images to help guide you. And at the same time, it is a question of survival, right?
To that point, it makes me think about the character of Marcus, who's like a journalist friend of Hawk's. And he's one of the few Black characters on the show. And he's always negotiating his Blackness and his gayness out in the world, but also in his work. And I've enjoyed seeing the Black gay world that they inhabit. I wonder, how do you see the character of Marcus within the world of fellow travelers?
I wish that he felt a little bit less didactic. I think that, earlier I said that the show doesn't feel didactic, but I think when there are those like little moments, I feel like Marcus is sort of the character that he's sort of like the vector through which a lot of those like lessons are born. I think the idea that like he feels like he has to either choose his Blackness or choose his queerness in his public life, I thought was really fascinating, because he basically believes, probably correctly, that he can't really be an out Black gay man because it will in some way invalidate a lot of his points about racism. And he can sort of have more authority to speak about the racism in BC and how these, anti-segregationist policies that are supposed to be enforced are not being enforced. How did you feel about Marcus?
I see like in like the story sense how Marcus can be like a foil for Hawk and also like an alternative path for Hawk. When I look at Marcus and I look at his relationship with Frankie and I see that like their Black gay DC world, I keep thinking, oh, there's just so much more here to get into. Like there's so much there that I'm just like, I agree. I think that for what Marcus is, I think that the show is doing a lot with regard to like trying to bring in history and give him like a world to inhabit and be a part of, apart from Hawk's world. But I also think that like, I don't know, I would watch like 8 seasons of a show about Marcus's life, but that's just me. Okay, I cannot let this conversation wrap up without asking you about these sex scenes on Fellow Travelers. I have been loving them. They are dynamic, they serve the story, and they're hot. But also, sometimes I feel like when you see gay sex in mainstream epics, sometimes the sex scenes can be a little sanitized. I feel like these are really dynamic and hot in a way that doesn't feel like it's necessarily specifically aimed at like comforting a straight audience,
Thank God.
You described the sex scenes in Fellow Travelers as gleefully creative, and I agree. What do you think makes the sex scene on this show so gleefully creative?
I don't remember at which point I observed this, but if you sort of tally up those scenes, they do a different thing in every single one of those scenes.
I noticed. I noticed.
But I actually wonder if part of what makes the sex scenes so good is that they are talking the entire time.
I have my hand. I am thinking right now. My hand is you have it on my forehead. I'm sitting here like, what? But that is such a good point.
I mean, you learn so much about the characters, right? And I think this is like a really, really great illustration of who Hawk is. He wants to be the top, or he wants to be like the guy who picks. He wants to be in charge of like the acts. And he's generally the top in their shenanigans. And then you sort of wonder, like, is this all it's going to be for them? And then sometimes there's like a moment where he's like, actually, now it's your turn. And you're sort of like, wow, what is this saying about their relationship at this point? Is Hawk figuring out a way to be like an actual person and not just like a damaged jerk?
We've been talking about this phenomenal, wonderfully done, high quality, limited run miniseries. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that that's a very specific type of programming. And that also requires a specific kind of budget. After all of the turmoil and change in Hollywood this past year, it kind of feels less and less likely that series like this that will be made. One of my editors remarked that this series, Fellow Travelers, feels like it was greenlit in another era, like a bygone era. Is this kind of miniseries the last of a dying breed?
I get this question a lot now. Mm-hmm. And the only answer I really have is I hope not. Part of like why prestige TV became a thing is because the middlebrow segment of the movies, like essentially the deep budgeted or like the medium budgeted adult dramas that we used to have in the 90s have disappeared, right?
Yeah.
So this is like now where people who want grown-up entertainment go for what they are no longer getting at the movies in large part. People still want that stuff somewhere.
Thank you so much, Inkoo. It was so great to have you.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me talk about this beautiful show.
That was Inkoo Kang, television critic at The New Yorker. Coming up, singer-songwriter Olivia Dean joins the show for an intimate chat and IBAM's first ever live in-studio performance. Stay tuned.
This message is brought to you by Apple Pay. Plastic cards can be stolen, copied, skimmed, and even fraudulently swiped. Instead, pay the Apple way. Apple Pay is easy, secure, and built into iPhone. All you have to do is set it up. Just add a card in the Wallet app and you're good to go. This message comes from NPR sponsor Discover. Like using debit over credit? Think it's time to also get rewarded? Well, now you can with Discover Cashback Debit. It's a checking account that rewards everyone with cash back on everyday purchases, plus all the things you've been contemplating. So that concert, no-brainer. Self-care? Yes, please. Do what you love and get cash back while you're doing it. Check out eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Neutral. Neutral offers organic, pasture-raised milk that is carbon neutral certified. They're on a mission to reduce the carbon footprint of agriculture by partnering with family farms across the country to implement carbon reduction projects. To learn more about how Neutral makes carbon neutral certified milk a reality, not by 2030 or 2050, but today, visit eatneutral.com or find Neutral milk nationwide at Whole Foods Market, Sprouts, and other natural retailers.
Hey, I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show where we talk about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. Next, we're going to do something a little different. An IBAM Unplugged, if you will. That means a live performance and intimate conversation with an up-and-coming singer-songwriter. And gather around because I feel like you're going to be hearing a lot more from her in the future. While most popular music right now gives club, dance floor, and oonts, which has its place, this artist is embracing the softer side of pop and paying homage to the soul singers who came before her.
Hold you up so highly, deep under your spell. Your opinions would
Today,
define
I'm speaking with Olivia Dean. She's a Mercury Prize finalist who's performed at Glastonbury and even won the praise of Sir Elton John himself. Her music is sweet and layered, bringing in sounds that reflect her British and Jamaican Guyanese upbringing.
if I could, would it go back where we started? I know you're still waiting, wondering where my heart is. Praying things won't
After a bevy of covers and singles, Olivia released her debut album, Messy, earlier this year. On the last leg of her first American tour, she and her guitarist Finn Zeffirino Burchell stopped by NPR West in Culver City for a little chat about respecting the subtlety in soft pop. Olivia, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Hello.
We are so excited to have you here today. I want to start with first things first. So your stage name is also your actual name,
I know.
first and last, Olivia Dean. But your full name is Olivia Lauren Dean, Lauren with a Y.
That is correct. After Miss Lauryn Hill herself.
Yeah, I wonder. So now, how did you get that name and what has it meant to you?
Wow, great question. And it's funny you asked that because yesterday we were in San Francisco And I was walking down the street and I saw a poster that said that Lauryn Hill was in town because she was playing these run of shows in San Francisco. And I was like, oh my God, we're in the same place right now. And like, obviously I'm not related to her in any way, shape or form. I have inherited like nothing from her. We're not, we're not linked. When I was in the womb, I think my mum was listening to a lot of Lauryn Hill, and my mum was like, that can be Olivia's middle name.
Hmm. I imagine your mom was listening to a lot of the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Was that an album that was like on repeat in your house when you were growing up?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely on repeat, still on repeat. And when I was making my album, I think it was a reference for me, not necessarily sonically, but I had spoken a lot with Matt, who I ended up finishing the album with, about albums that felt like a North Star. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks,
Cheers, love.
To stay on your childhood for a second, you famously went to the Brit School. For
Yes.
our American listeners, it's like LaGuardia High School in New York City, aka the Fame School.
Fame.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, the alumni of the Brit School are like a who's who of British talent, like Amy Winehouse, Adele, Leona Lewis, Tom Holland, Ray. What was it like to attend, and how did it help you get your start in the industry?
Attending the Brit School was like probably one of the best things that I ever did. Strangely, I think people think it's like this kind of secret society, but it's really a free school in South London, in Croydon. You apply online, and it's just such an inspiring environment to be in, because suddenly you go from being the weird person in your school who wants to sing in all the assemblies that everybody's like, shut up. And then suddenly everybody's the weird person in assembly, and then you're allowed to go even further with your weirdness because it's encouraged.
You know, to that end, what were you listening to when you were a kid? Like, you grew up in, I'm going to butcher the name. I'm going to try not to. Is it Walthamstow?
Wow, that's great. Great.
So
Yeah.
East London.
East London. Yeah,
London has a very rich musical history, but also East London has its own flavor. Like, how did the East London of your childhood shape your taste and interest in music?
East London people stereotypically have a kind of, how do you explain it? Like, you know, the way that Adele talks, it's quite like
It's got a nice lilt to it. It
A
has
lilt
with a little
with-
punctuation, a little staccato to it.
punctuation. I wouldn't say we're like rough, but straight to the point.
There's an edge.
There's an edge.
There's
yes,
an
Finn's
edge.
Right. There's an edge.
Thank you, Finn.
So I think that definitely seeps into my lyrics and into my personality as a person. But growing up, I think I had a very eclectic music taste, which, made me feel like I could make anything I wanted. I didn't feel like because of the way that I looked or anything, or who I was, that I had to make R&B, or that I had to, I like all sorts. For me, growing up, being mixed race and then being in East London, I had to let go of genre in terms of starting to create. I know that my music has a genre. I'm not saying it's like this crazy left material. I'm aware I'm making pop music, but I just, in the sense of like allowing yourself to create freely, to try to not put yourself in a box before you make it.
I see that a lot in general with like sort of British pop, R&B, pop and B. Like, do you think of yourself as having a specifically London sound in that sense?
I think so. Sometimes I can't help in the lyric saying very London things. A really good example of this, which has been so funny because we've been touring in the States here. I have a song called Slowly, and in one of the first lines, it's like, I could have opened up, cried and almost been myself, but I took the piss instead. And took the piss is like, I made a joke.
Yeah.
But some people think I'm saying I went to the toilet, like I had a wee. And I've seen people cover the song and they've actually changed it to, and I took a piss instead. And I'm crying, laughing, because I'm like, no.
Not quite. That's not. That
not
is a very
quite.
American interpretation, though. When you say piss, you either have made someone angry or, like you said, having a wee.
Yeah. But that's so funny to me. But I got to keep that stuff in the lyrics, because that's how I would say it. There's a lyric in one of the songs, Messy, about, going 71 down the M25.
And hitting 71 down the M25, ignoring that noisy backseat driver.
Which is a classic motorway in London. But I'm here in, you know what I mean, Toronto, and I see people going down the M25. I'm like, okay, babe.
It's music. Music is the universal language. It's the universal language.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's just funny.
No need to be ready. It's okay if it's messy. I'm
I want to talk about the journey of your debut album, Messy. It has a very pretty and organic sound with excellent lyricism. How did this album start within you?
Being completely honest, I went into making it feeling incapable. I just was in a real low self-esteem version of myself that was like, I can't make an album, like, I'm not good enough. So not a great place to start creating from. But I pushed through it and just tried to write honestly about how I was feeling about the main themes were falling in love again. And that felt like an obstacle because I think I'd previously convinced myself that the best music was made, you know, in breakup, because that's where I'd existed for so long. And then I wasn't going through a breakup anymore and I was happy. And I was like, well, who wants to hear about that? Like, it's so much more difficult to find the nuance in happiness. So I thought about that for a while, but then I was like, no, it is interesting. Learning how to be vulnerable again and opening up to somebody. And then in the process of finishing the record, I was just like, just get it done. Like, stop, you know, worrying about it being perfect or like so profound or so excellent to the extent where you're being so reductive, you're not finishing anything. Allow it to be messy. And Messy was actually the last song that I wrote for the album. And then I was like, oh, it's done.
It's a little bit messy.
You have to listen to that feeling in your belly and know when she's saying, this is good, this is good.
It's a little bit messy.
Or when you write something and you just want to listen to it over and over and over and over again.
I'm a little bit messy.
Speaking of the album, I want to break down one of your songs, The Hardest Part. Could we hear it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Finn's picking up his guitar now. Ready?
Call me up to meet you, static on the phone. Normally I need you, this time I don't wanna go. 'Cause lately I've been growing into someone you don't know. You had the chance to love her, but apparently you don't. No, you don't. So even if I could, wouldn't go back where we started. I know you're still waiting, wondering when my heart is. Praying things won't change, but the hardest part is you're realizing maybe I ain't the same. And what you're waiting for ain't there no more anyway. Held you up so highly, deep under your spell. Your opinions would define me, but this time I made some for myself. 'Cause lately I've been certain there's no further to go. Whoa, yeah, you had the chance to love me, but apparently you won't. No, you won't. So even if I could, wouldn't go back where we started. I know you're still waiting, wondering where my heart is. Praying things won't change, but the hardest part is you're realizing maybe I ain't the same. And what you're waiting for ain't there no more anyway. And it's okay. I'm not gonna remember you that way. You say I'm different now, like that's so strange, but I was only 18. You should have known that I was always gonna change. So even if I wouldn't go back where we started, I know you're still waiting, wondering where my heart is. Praying things won't change, but the hardest part is you're realizing maybe I ain't the same. Ain't there no more. I ain't there no more. Ain't there no more. I ain't there no more. Ain't there no more. But the hardest part is you're realizing maybe I ain't the same. And what you're waiting for ain't there no more anyway.
That was lovely. That was so cool. How did the sound come together? Did the words come first? Did they come together? Did the melody come first? Because it does have a little bit of a bittersweet quality to it. Like you're happy that you grew, but you're sad because you can't experience what in your mind could have been. Yeah, how did that come together?
I wrote this song in Denmark with two excellent songwriters called Max and Bastian. Max Wolfgang and Bastian Langback. We say their full name so people know. And I wanted it to feel fluffy and like have this kind of like Diana Rossi kind of like staccato-ness, you know.
Oh, and that's very much in the video too. I mean, the video has this like black and white, like Supremes kind of like feel to it.
I'd had a conversation with my mum where she told me that her sister and their cousin used to dress up as the 3 Degrees in their room and have the hairbrushes. When will I see you again? And I just thought that was so beautiful. And I love like Motown girl groups. And I was like, wow, what if I could do a video where I was all 3 of the Supremes? And this just felt perfect for that song.
It sounds at home in the rest of the album. So, I mean, it all worked out. Coming up, the Caribbean history that textured the album, and another live performance from Olivia Dean.
The NPR network is supported by the communities we serve. That's you. In return, our journalism is available to everyone free of charge. Keep this public service strong. Give today at npr.org/donate.
Paywalls limiting access to news aren't our style at NPR. We're on a mission to create a more informed public, and you can join us by giving today at npr.org/donate.
Hi, I'm Ramteen Arablouei from NPR's Throughline podcast. NPR doesn't just cover the news. We bring people together. We're proud that NPR is consistently ranked among America's most trusted news outlets. And we also put our trust in you. Please help keep this free public service strong by giving today at npr.org/donate.
It's time to stop hiding. It's time to be true to who you are. Go ahead, let NPR become your entire personality. At the NPR online shop, we've got free shipping on all orders over $99. Totes, hats, t-shirts, the works, only until December 8th. Live your truth at a discount at shop.npr.org.
You talk about following your gut, and that makes me think about something else that I have noticed about your music. Like, pop music in general right now is in a very escapist, dance-heavy space. And I do love that. I do love it. I can't even lie. I think we all do. But, you know, people contain multitudes. We have different modes. It feels like your music is asking us to kind of take a step back from that and actually reflect on ourselves and on our relationships. But it's still satisfyingly pop. I wonder, like, how do you think about your music and your sound, your current sound, within the greater landscape of what we're listening to right now across the pop landscape?
That's a brilliant question. I, as you said, can recognize that a lot of pop music now exists in that space, and I enjoy it. It's just never been me and never will be. I love soul music, and not in the black and white sense, I guess, as like, you know, soul as a genre, but music that fills you up and allows you to, as you said, reflect and express your emotions to other people. Like Bill Withers, what a gift to this earth, you know, like Carole King. I just think I've always been obsessed with like timeless songs because I started doing musical theatre, but also covers. I really saw songs as like such a tool for me to help me to understand how I was feeling and like get something out. And so all I've ever wanted to do is try to craft those little things and just add them to the river of songs that, you know, flows throughout the whole of time. Just pour my little cup in there, you know, and hope they flow on. And yeah, I don't know. I think when I first started making stuff, I definitely was told by, you know, music label people, those classic people that everyone talk about, like, that's pastiche, you know, don't try and do the soul music thing. It's been done and it's not forward thinking and experimental. I don't want to be experimental. That's not I think other people do that so great and I love it. I just know that I like songs and live musicians and chords and yeah, I just like it. I like what I do.
Something that I definitely get the sense that you like based on the production style that you've employed on your album is a lot of instrumentation. It has a very pretty organic sound. How many instrumentalists in total are featured on the album? Because, I mean, there's a lot going on there.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Lots of different mix of humans. My core band there's 4, Finn, Desh, and Joel. Oh, and me, 3, sorry. And I'm in the band. I played percussion on the album.
Hey.
I played some vibraphone on the album. I played some timpani on the album, tambourine. I love percussion so much. We just had all sorts of people come in, amazing brass section come in. We had somebody come play steel pan and play with that cross culture. So it was like we had the steel pans going, like representing the Caribbean side, but then it was like the horns doing this kind of orchestral kind of British march, like the Queen's Jubilee. And like, it's just fun, you know, to experiment with like the instruments as another language and, you know, what you're trying to say in the song.
Like adding as much to the character in the world of the song as a lyric can.
Exactly. Music's supposed to be fun, so we just had fun making this album.
I have another song of yours that I really love called Carmen. It's the very last song on the album, and it tells the story of your grandmother. She immigrated from Guyana as a young woman as part of the Windrush generation. For those who don't know, the Windrush generation is a generation of Caribbean people who migrated, or people from British colonies, but many Caribbean people who migrated to the UK in the wake of the 1948 British Nationality Act, which gave people in the British colonies the right to work and live in Britain. Could we hear the song? Do you have the time to play the song?
Why not?
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to hear the song.
For you, Brittany, anything.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
First time on a plane, 18 you came, you found a door and held it open. No way to know how to make a home in someone else's motherland. Oh, you transplanted a family tree, and a part of it grew into me. You're stronger than I'll ever be, never got a jubilee. I'll throw it for you, Carmen, Carmen, I will. The only place I wanna stand is holding on to grandma's hands. Let them adore you, Carmen, Carmen, I will. Carmen, Carmen, look at all the trouble that you made, carved your initials in this island. but the Weetabix don't taste the same, and we're all talking to our phones. But you reigned over a family tree, and I'll carefully carry the seeds. You're stronger than I'll ever be, never got a jubilee. I'll throw it for you, Carmen, Carmen, I will. The only place I wanna stand is holding on to grandma's hands. Let them adore you, Carmen, Carmen, I will. Stronger than I'll ever be, never got a jubilee. I'll throw it for you, Carmen, Carmen, I will. The only place I wanna stand is holding on to grandma's hands. Let them adore you, Carmen, Carmen, I will.
That was great. That was great. That was really, really, really beautiful. I mean, there is just that lyric about never got a jubilee. I'll throw it for you, Carmen. Oh, it's so beautiful. As an American, I only learned what a jubilee was like a year ago, because
that is a very
British
thing.
Yeah, it's like a celebration for the monarch, right?
Right. So it was interesting at the time when I was spending all this time with my granny. The Queen was still alive, and there was this massive jubilee for her, and she was being celebrated, and everybody was, the Queen, the Queen, the Queen. And at the same time, there was this whole scandal going on where a lot of people that came over in the Windrush were being deported and sent back. And my grandmother was, she kept saying, "Where's my passport? Where's my passport?" And she was so worried that they were going to make her go back. And I just thought that you're a queen. You deserve to be celebrated. Your whole generation of people deserve to be celebrated the same way that the Queen is being celebrated right now. And I was like, you need a jubilee. And in my mind, I was just picturing, her on her throne and everybody celebrating her for all the hard work she put in, and the rest of those people that built up, the country at the time and came to work and, faced a lot of racial abuse at the time, and it was very difficult. And she really made something for herself from nothing. And she had my mum, and my mum had me, and now I get to do what I do. I could have had a very, very different, and also could have been amazing life in the Caribbean. I mean, I would love to be in the Caribbean now, honey. But she thought ahead at such a young age. Like, I'm talking about being 18 in the hardest part, and my breakup and how, hard that was for me.
Right.
And her at 18 is like, I'm going to go on a plane and leave everything I know behind. And I just think that's very special. That line about you transplanted a family tree and I'll carefully carry the seeds. I feel like I have a responsibility, to go forward and enjoy my life because she made those sacrifices,
I understand. I really do understand. It seems that you are doing exactly that.
Yeah, I'm having a great time.
Well, Olivia, thank you so, so much for joining us today. And also, a big round of applause and a big thank you to Finn Zeffirino Birchall.
Finn Zeffirino Birchall.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks again to Olivia Dean and her guitarist, Finn Zeffirino Birchall. Olivia's debut album, Messy, is out now.
Hey, Brittany.
Hey, Brittany.
Hey, Brittany.
Hey, Brittany. It's Wes from New York. We
we all got our Spotify Wrapped this week, which is my favorite holiday of the year. And they have this new weird feature that shows you where geographically other people are that listen to the same type of music as you. I got Burlington, Vermont, which is weird. And a lot of people either got that or Berkeley or Cambridge. What did you get? And it's not accurate, right?
West. Thank you so much for calling in with this question. This has been on my mind. So for those who don't know, with the Spotify Wrapped, which is like their year-end feature where they show you basically what you've been listening to or what they tell you you've been listening to all year. My top 5 artists that I listened to this year was fairly accurate. Although I listened to a lot more Steely Dan than they gave me credit for. I just want to say that. But they added a new feature this year where they like show you where other people are who listen to music in the way that you do. The thing is, though, is I, like many people, received a location of Berkeley, California. But like, they also show you 3 artists that apparently are very popular in that particular area. So the 3 artists they told me put me in common with Berkeley, California listeners were Victoria Monet, Kalela, who's been on this show, and also Nick Hakim, who I adore. The thing is, though, is that my husband also got Berkeley, California, and he had 3 completely different artists. And then I saw somebody else who was like, oh, they have me in Berkeley, California because I listened to Pavement and Fiona Apple. And no disrespect to Fiona Apple, I love her. But I don't really overlap with that person's listening, and I don't overlap that much with my husband's listening. So I'm like, is this just like that one BuzzFeed quiz where it's like, which Sex and the City character are you? And then no matter what you put in, everybody gets Miranda? I don't know. But I know that Berkeley, California is not really the town for me. No disrespect whatsoever. I'm an East Coast girly at this point. Does Berkeley really match my music vibe? My conspiracy theory brain tells me that this was a really fun little social media thing that they were doing to get us all talking. That's just my 2 cents. I would love to hear from the rest of you all, though. Like, what cities did you get? Let me know. Tweet at me or email the show. I'm just nosy. Just let me know. West, thank you so much for kicking off this line of thought, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. If you have a thought or question about pop culture, send us a voice memo at ibam@npr.org. That's IBAM@npr.org. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Barton Girdwood,
Alexis Williams,
Liam McBain,
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Jessica Plachek,
Bilal Qureshi.
Engineering support came from
Gilly Moon,
Maggie Luthar.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
Our senior VP of programming is
Anya Grundman.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
Hey, it's Robin Hilton from NPR's All Songs Considered. I'm one of thousands of NPR network voices coming to you from over 200 local newsrooms across the country. We bring all Americans closer together through free and independent journalism, music, politics, culture, and so much more. The NPR Network. What you hear changes everything.
Want all of NPR without relying on your radio? Visit npr.org to be connected to your local station wherever you are and wherever the news takes you. Get your vital mix of rigorously reported local and national stories, all live, free, and at your fingertips at npr.org.
Hi, it's Terry Gross, the host of Fresh Air. We bring you in-depth, long-form interviews with actors, directors, musicians, authors, journalists, and more. Listen to our Peabody Award-winning Fresh Air podcast from WHYY and NPR.